Jonathan.
Sarah, first I've got a question I wanted to ask you, but first just to follow up on that. It seems like everybody that you mentioned has been a political critic of the president. Is he going after his political opponents with this?
No, if there were others that weren't, that we deemed necessary, we would certainly take a look and review those as well.
Okay, I want to ask you about something the president's attorney said. Rudy Giuliani said of the special counsel Robert Mueller needs to write the damn report so we can see it and rebut it. And he said if it's not written within the next 2 or 3 weeks, quote, we will just unload on him like a ton of bricks. Is the president okay with his attorney threatening the special counsel in this way?
Certainly, we've made clear we'd like to see this wrap up. For questions specific about comments by Mr. Giuliani, I'd refer you back to him.
Was that authorized by the president?
Once again, for questions specific about the investigation, particularly comments from Rudy Giuliani, I'd refer you back to him to address those. Jeff?
Hey, Sarah, following up on John's question, how is this announcement by the president, how can Americans not interpret that as a getting back against his critics? And isn't it also an attempt to curtail their freedom of speech by penalizing them for being critical on television?
Not at all. The president has a constitutional responsibility to protect classified information and who has access to it. And that's what he's doing, is fulfilling that responsibility in this action. This is action only specific to Mr. Brennan, and the others are currently under review.
Is this the kind of precedent he wants to set for future presidents when his administration is out of office? And why are there no Republicans on that list?
Once again, if we deemed it necessarily, we would certainly look into that and be happy to review those. Justin?
I wanted to ask about Turkey, but just to buttonhole on what Jeff said, I guess the reason people would say that this argument strains credibility is there's obvious examples, even from this administration. Your former national security advisor is admitted to lying to the FBI. Why is this only a list of Democrats who have been critical of the administration, and why should Americans have confidence that you are taking this seriously if there's not a single Republican on that list?
Again, certainly we would look at those if we deemed it necessary, and we'll keep you posted if that list gets updated.
So on Turkey, Turkey announced today that they're going to slap tariffs on about $1 billion of American goods. So I'm wondering if you have a response to that, and if there's any discussion internally about retaliating towards that, continuing to escalate this.
Yeah, the tariffs from Turkey are certainly regrettable and a step in the wrong direction. The tariffs that the United States placed on Turkey were out of national security interest. Theirs are out of retaliation. I'm not going to get ahead of anything on what we may or may not do in an effort to respond, but certainly we don't support Turkey's decision to retaliate against us protecting our national security interest.
An appeals court in Turkey today denied Pastor Brunson's appeal to try to be released. Does the administration view that as a new setback, or as sort of maintaining the status quo?
We feel that Turkey, and specifically President Erdogan, have treated Pastor Brunson, who we know to be a very good person and a strong Christian who's done nothing wrong, very unfairly, very badly, and it's something that we won't forget in the administration. Let's move on. Jake, go ahead.
Thank you, Sarah. So the administration has put up a robust defense of Pastor Brunson, but at the same time, there are tens of thousands of Christians in North Korea who have been imprisoned almost exclusively because of their religion. Open Door USA considered North Korea to be the #1 country when it comes to persecution of the Christians. Is this something that the administration has also been looking into?
Certainly, we would like to see any individual persecuted for their Christian beliefs or imprisoned released. Again, we've been working with North Korea on a number of fronts. That's something we'd certainly like to see them change their behavior on. I know it's been discussed, and again, certainly something we'd like to see their behavior changed on. Sorry, Jake, I got to keep. Go ahead.
Here's my question. Although territory held by ISIS has been reduced by over 90%, a recent UN report suggests that as many as 30,000 ISIS members still exist in Iraq and Syria. So, first of all, what's the administration's take on this specific UN report? And secondly, what would the administration consider an overall victory against ISIS?
We'd like to see every single member of ISIS defeated across the globe. I think that would be the ultimate victory. John, go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Closing arguments are taking place across the river in Alexandria for the tax fraud trial of Paul Manafort. And In mid-June, the president said that he felt badly for Mr. Manafort and that he believes he's being treated unfairly. Is the president still friends with Mr. Manafort? When was the last time you spoke with Mr. Manafort?
I'm not aware of any recent conversations that they've had. Blake?
I believe he's being treated unfairly.
I think that the president's made that clear in his previous comments. I don't have anything to add beyond that at this point. Blake, go ahead.
Sarah, thank you. You just said a couple minutes ago that the increased tariff levels with Turkey were out of the national security interest, but when the president announced it on Twitter last week or earlier this month, he said, quote, at the time, he said, "Our relations with Turkey are not good at this time." The suggestion there being that this has to do with the pastor that is being held in Turkey. Simply put, if Pastor Brunson is allowed to leave Turkey, do those tariff levels go away? Is that kind of the deal that could be in place?
No,
is that a deal that could be on the table?
The tariffs that are in place on steel would not be removed with the release of Pastor Brunson. The tariffs are specific to national security. The sanctions, however, that have been placed on Turkey are specific to Pastor Brunson and others that we feel are being held unfairly, and we would consider that at that point.
What, in the interest of national security, what's changed over the last month or so with Turkey that you're justifying national security?
Again, the president's been clear about the steel and aluminum industries, steel particularly in this case, that those are industries that must be protected. We must have the ability to reach certain levels of manufacturing of those products here in the United States for the purposes of national security. John?
Thank you, Sarah. I was going to ask about Turkey, but based on your opening statement, I have to point out that the attorneys for former Director Comey and former Deputy Director McCabe say that their passes were automatically demagnetized the day that they were separated from their offices. Two others, Mr. Clapper and General Hayden, have said they do not use the pass at all. And also, it's my understanding from an historical standpoint, this would be the first time the president himself removed the passes from anybody, that has normally been done by agency heads or immediate superiors to people. Have you considered all these things in the process you say you're going to prove?
Again, the other individuals, those are being reviewed, and that determination will be made at a later date. Those that have already been revoked, it would be for the purpose of reviewing whether or not they should be reinstated or not. Major.
Sir, just so I understand the standard that the president is applying, you outlined two areas of either contradictory or erroneous testimony from Brennan. Is that the only standard by which this administration is asserting he should have his security clearance revoked?
Again, I laid out the reasons in the opening statement, specific to Director Brennan.
Right.
The others are currently under review. I don't have any specifics on those at this point.
Is that the standard? If you give erroneous testimony, you say something you have to correct at a certain date in the future. If you work for this administration, for example, does that mean you could lose your security clearance?
My understanding is this is being looked at on a case-by-case basis, which is why each individual is being reviewed and determination made at that point.
Does this administration have any reason to believe or evidence to suggest Brennan has misused classified information or monetized his access to it, as was alleged earlier by this administration?
Again, I've laid out the reasons for the decision that was made on this specific instance. We'll continue to review the other actions. Andrew?
Could we assume by the absence of you not saying those things, you didn't find any evidence of that?
No, I wouldn't make any assumptions. I'm telling you what the decision was based off on in this case. Andrew?
Thank you very much. I wanted to follow up on the question yesterday about Afghanistan. Today there was another suicide attack in Kabul which killed 37 people in a school. A military base in the north has been overrun by the Taliban. They have also seized parts of the eastern provincial capital. Why do you think President Trump's strategy in Afghanistan is working?
As always, we're going to continue to review and look at the best ways to move forward. I'll leave it to the Department of Defense to get into specifics about tactical situations on the ground. What I can tell you is that we're committed to finding a political solution to end the conflict in Afghanistan. We're exploring all avenues for dialogue and close coordination with the Afghan government. We're going to continue to do that. If we have announcements or changes in the policy, we'll certainly let you know. Peter?
Follow up on the Turkey question, if I may. Have you guys assessed whether the liquidity situation in Turkey's financial sector is a risk in light of the fall of the lira. It's fallen like a quarter in the last 3 or 4 days.
Certainly, we're monitoring the situation with respect to the Turkish economy and the decline of the lira, but Turkey's economic problems, those are part of a long-term trend, something of its own making and not the result of any actions the United States has taken. Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. One of the individuals that you listed on that list of clearance that is under review is Bruce Ord. He's a current employee of the Department of Justice. So instead of putting him under the review, does the president believe he should be fired?
I don't have any personnel announcements on that front. I can only speak to this specific case.
Why just put a security clearance under review, which would render him unable to do his job and not just fire him?
Once again, I don't have any personnel announcements on that front. I can just tell you we're looking into that specific matter. Peter, sorry, I called on you earlier.
Thank you, Sarah. If people who criticize the president publicly on TV or public in their criticisms, are they at greater risk of losing their security clearances than people who stay silent?
Once again, this is looked at on a case-by-case basis, and we'll do an individual review and make that determination. Kevin?
Thank you, Sarah. A question about the return of lawmakers on Capitol Hill, and then a follow-up very quickly. Now that they're back, can you sort of lay out the White House strategy for moving forward with this agenda? We've talked about wall funding. Obviously, a lot of people are very curious about the Kavanaugh nomination moving forward, DACA and other issues. Is there a strategy in place to begin to work with lawmakers now that they're back?
Certainly. We have continued ongoing conversations on a number of fronts with lawmakers, even while they were not here in Washington. We are happy that the hearing dates have been set for Justice Kavanaugh, and we look forward to seeing him get confirmed. Catherine?
My very quick follow-up was, first of all, you didn't mention anything about a possible shutdown. Is that still something that the president is continuing? And my follow-up is going to be on the Farm Bill. There are a great number of people in a great number of states that are curious about this work requirement the USDA is trying to implement. In some places, they already have it. They say you have to work. In other areas, you don't have that requirement. Is that something the White House still supports?
Something we still support in terms of a shutdown. I don't have any announcements on that front. We certainly still want to see a lot of things happen. We'd love for Congress to actually do its job, particularly when it comes to immigration. We have a completely broken system, and we'd like to see them work with us to fix it. Catherine?
Thank you, Sarah.
I don't have any updates for you on that front right now. Okay. Catherine?
Omarosa Manigault Newman was the highest-ranking African-American staffer in the West Wing. No black...
She actually didn't work in the West Wing, but go ahead.
Well, no staffer has been appointed at that level since her absence. Can you tell us exactly how many African-American staffers there are in this building? And is it a priority for the administration to reflect the diversity of the country?
Certainly, as I addressed yesterday, we value diversity not just at the White House, but throughout the entire administration. And we're going to continue trying to diversify the staff. We have a large number of diverse staffers from various backgrounds, both race, religion, gender.
How many staffers are there in this building?
Look, I'm not going to go through and do a count. The same way I'm not going to do a sit down and count on the staffers that are in your news organizations.
13% of the country is African American.
And we would love to diversify our staff and continue to do so. We do think it's important. We're going to continue to work to make that happen. Raquel?
Sarah, thank you very much. About the election last night, we are seeing the Democrats embracing more diversity, choosing Muslims, also candidates, transgender candidates, rejecting president's agenda. So my question is, what do you think will be the impact of his agenda and also these recent controversies about race and minorities on the election in November?
Again, I think people are looking at the policies that the individuals are implementing and how those are going to affect those communities and whether or not it's actually going to help individuals, people across this country. That's what we're looking at. That's what we're focused on. That's what we're going to continue to do. I'm going to take one last question. Eamon?
Thanks, Sarah. I'd like to ask you a couple questions about the President's recent comments, if I could. One is on Harley-Davidson. The President commented earlier in the week, many Harley-Davidson owners plan to boycott the company if manufacturing moves overseas. Great. Is the President of the United States endorsing a boycott of an iconic American company here?
Look, the president has made his feelings on that very clear. The president's focus is on making sure that we get good trade deals and that we keep business and industry here in the United States.
Does he want to see a boycott of Harley, though?
I think he'd rather see them put all their companies back here in the United States and build all of their great machines here in this country. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.
All right, so the headline, you just heard from Sarah Sanders, that this White House, that this president has now revoked the security clearance of the former CIA chief, John Brennan, and they have a mighty long list of others whose clearances they would like to revoke, the likes of James Comey, Jim Clapper, Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, on and on and on. We're going to come back to that. Jim Sciutto is up first with me with some additional reporting to layer into this news that we were all just hit with. Jim, what do you have?
Well, Brooke, I'm told by an official with knowledge that the Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coats, the nation's senior-most intelligence official, and I should remind people, an official appointed by President Trump, that Dan Coats, the DNI, was not consulted by the White House or the President on this decision to revoke the former CIA Director John Brennan's clearance. Remarkable, considering this is presumably an intelligence decision, and let's just be clear, that the decision to revoke clearances is normally reserved for situations in which someone abuses that clearance by, for instance, revealing classified material. This one, because when you go through that list of officials there, Brooke, that you mentioned, John Brennan, who's had it revoked already, but James Clapper, James Comey, Sally Yates, the one thing they have in common, of course, is public criticism of this president. This appears to be a political decision, not an intelligence decision. And perhaps backing that up is our reporting that the nation's senior-most intelligence official, DNI Coats, was not consulted on this decision by the president. The other thing I would note, Brooke, is when you look at these officials in that list, together they have decades. I'm talking about, if you add it up, more than 100 years experience in intelligence. Clapper himself, 50 years. This goes back to the Vietnam War. James Brennan, John Brennan, rather, was in the CIA for 25 years. He was, for a time, the senior counterterrorism advisor to this president. The reason those officials keep their security clearances after they leave office is so that they can be consulted when there are issues of national security before an administration. For instance, a terror attack or trying to judge a nuclear agreement with North Korea, etc. And there's reasons why officials at that level keep those security clearances so that they could be consulted and be up to date on the latest intelligence. So this is truly a remarkable decision by this president. And again, to do so without consulting his senior-most intelligence advisors.